Welcome back to Watch the Bookerman and to episode number 42 of Paul Heyman's TNA 2010. This week's episode is the go-home episode of Impact before No Surrender, which is the last pay-per-view before Bound for Glory, so everything matters more during this period of the year, and we begin with a recap of last week's show, particular focus going to Samoa Joe choking out AJ Styles at the end of the night, before going face-to-face with Kurt Angle, who he will face at No Surrender. This leads into some exclusive footage captured after Impact, which shows a heated confrontation that saw AJ Styles and Samoa Joe have to be pulled apart in the back. The cameras kept rolling and we caught this intense moment. Mauro and Taz explained that those two are tonight under strict orders not to lay a finger on one another before the pay-per-view, both of them in important matches on that show. The commentators also put over the match between Abyss and Eric Young tonight, as well as an update on Wrestling's Greatest Tag Team. They will actually be in action tonight against Bad Influence. Shelton Benjamin isn't too injured that he won't be able to compete. They are testing that out tonight to see if they can compete at the pay-per-view, giving it a little road test on that injured shoulder. There will be more on that later, but first, Roderick Strong will face Jimmy Jacobs, and if Jimmy Jacobs somehow manages to win, Roderick Strong will be forced to join the New Age, the wager that he set out a couple of weeks back on Impact. But that is what we've got planned for tonight's show, as well as plenty more. It's a decent segment, nothing more than that, and Samoa Joe's poor improvising probably did bring it down a little bit as we go into that opening match. Or rather, we go into a promo. Before it, I forgot about this segment. Turning attention to the ring, we see that Mick Foley is already in it. He's made his entrance and he introduces Jimmy Jacobs, who is accompanied by the New Age members and Knockouts Tag Team Champions Alyssa Flash and Mischief. As Jacobs makes his way down to the ring, and once he's in it, Foley puts over the leader of the New Age as an underrated threat in the ring. People think of him as being just a mouthpiece, but actually he's a very accomplished professional wrestler. He says that tonight is going to prove that, and in return, Roderick Strong will embrace the New Age and they will move forward together. So unfortunately, Foley improvising poorly, which is something you very rarely see and is unexpected, but it's still an okay segment. I always go back to it, and this is a big part of why I'm dreading Mick Foley leaving. He will always be able to bring the New Age segments up to a decent level, whereas before then, if you remember, we were getting 30s and 40s, so it is a big concern after he leaves how the New Age will do, and this is probably the most important period of their being as a stable so far. A little bit worrying, but we will have to just work through it. There's a lot of cat and mouse to begin the match. Jimmy Jacobs doesn't really want to engage with Roderick Strong. Eventually there is a referee bump. Alyssa Flash or Mischief on the outside are distracting the referee, and then Roderick Strong is pushed directly into the referee by Jimmy Jacobs. Mick Foley then gets involved, hits a double arm DDT to an unsuspecting Roderick Strong. Jimmy Jacobs then goes to the top rope and hits maybe a splash or some kind of move just to add to the impact. It's not just Foley's finisher, but also a move from Jimmy Jacobs. The referee comes back round and counts the 1, 2, 3. Whether he likes it or not, Roderick Strong is now a member of the New Age. Jimmy Jacobs with a 40. Roderick Strong's 59 isn't great. We did keep him strong specifically in the booking notes because I didn't want this to come across as anything other than being a very screwy finish, and the fact that Roderick Strong would have beaten Jimmy Jacobs had there not been that outside interference. We are officially turning Mick Foley heel with that. A long overdue turn, really, considering the segments that he's been involved in and the fact that he's been pushing this New Age stable. After the match, Mick Foley returns to the ring and hands Jimmy Jacobs a piece of New Age merchandise, probably a t-shirt. Instead of waiting for Roderick Strong to return to his feet to hand him the t-shirt, Jacobs throws the piece down and instructs the New Age to leave without him. Having courted him for months, having put all this effort into getting him into the New Age, the commentators are quite surprised by the actions of Jimmy Jacobs, but Taz wonders if this is just another of the New Age's mind games. Are they showing Roderick Strong that while he may be in the group, he is still subservient to the leader of the New Age, Jimmy Jacobs? Returning from the break, Kurt Angle comes out and calls out Samoa Joe ahead of the pay-per-view. Usually this would probably be an opening segment or to start an hour or to end the final hour, but I wanted to do the New Age stuff almost to get it out of the way because it's not involved in building up to the pay-per-view, and then the rest of the show we can focus on building to No Surrender, and this is probably the biggest segment and the best segment on the show. Joe comes out quickly after Kurt Angle calls him out, and Angle warns him that he better be focused on no surrender. He's seen what happened with AJ Styles, and Kurt says he needs to draw a line under that right now. Otherwise, no surrender is going to be an easy night for Kurt Angle. So very, very confident from the World Heavyweight Champion there. But Joe laughs this off. He tells Kurt to look in his eyes and to look at his resume. Samoa Joe is always focused and he is always ready. Kurt knows that better than anybody, but Angle replies that he'd better be, and he better bring the Samoa Joe that made him the most feared competitor on the planet when Kurt Angle first joined TNA. There's been a few references to that. Joe maybe not being perceived as he once was, not quite as feared as he was all them years ago, but Joe assures Angle that he's as good as he ever was and he'll prove it at the pay-per-view. Kurt retorts that he'd believe that if it hadn't been 2.5 years since he held this championship. Samoa Joe goes nose to nose with Kurt Angle and he's had enough. The tension has been bubbling for weeks and weeks. We've expected this moment, but it eventually happens. Returning the favour for all those years ago, Samoa Joe headbutts the World Heavyweight Champion, a reverse of the iconic debut of Kurt Angle in TNA. A huge brawl breaks out. The two men have to be pulled apart by dozens of security guards. One of those typical big brawls where it's the wrestlers being brought together, pulled apart, brought together, pulled apart, and the commentators are just putting over how big this match is going to be, how much it means to everybody, and hopefully creating that big fight feel, gaining heat to the storyline. As I said, with an 89, Kurt Angle versus Samoa Joe, the storyline advancing, improvising well from both men, and while the commentary as always lets us down, we do get the crowd hotter, and getting an 89 segment, if we have a half decent main event, then you're almost guaranteeing yourself a really good episode of Impact. We then come back to the backstage area and Roderick Strong catches up with the rest of the New Age. He asks Jimmy what that was all about. They've wanted him for weeks. They did what they did to get him, so why now did they just leave him in the ring as if he's nothing to do with them? Is that it? Was all this just about humiliating Roderick Strong? Jimmy explains that that's not what it's about at all, but while Roderick Strong is New Age now, he can't forget what he did. Jacobs then sells his jaw, reminding Strong of the super kick that Roddy gave him a couple of months ago when they first proposed him joining the New Age, so there's almost the reminder there of the power dynamic in the group once again. But Jacobs changes demeanour, smiling as he says that as of right now, both sides need to forget the past, forget what happened months ago, forget what happened earlier tonight. They are the New Age and they all fight for the same cause. Jacobs then hugs a reluctant Roderick Strong. He's in the group, but he's not going to be best friends with these guys straight away, before Jacobs encourages the rest of the group to join in a big New Age group hug. Strong's face says it all. He's not enjoying this embrace, but he has no choice to accept his fate, at least for the next month. So it's only 28 days that he has to stay in this group. That was part of his condition. It's a trial period. If he doesn't like it, he's free to leave whenever he wants to. And Awesome Kong then squashes Lana Kinnear 3 days before she defends the Knockouts Championship against Madison Rayne. And the idea here is that it says 1 minute 9, that's because 1 minute is the lowest you can make a match. This match should be 10-15 seconds, and considering the length of it, it's actually an okay match. Awesome Kong with a decent performance in such a short period of time. But what's more the focus, Madison Rayne comes out to join commentary. She puts the headset on, says hi to Mauro and Taz, but doesn't even get the chance to sit down before the match is over. So in those few seconds that she's saying hello to the commentators, Awesome Kong has already defeated Lana Kinnear, who is just a local talent who we've brought in, I think, a few times now. I think she was Brooke Tessmacher's partner at one point before we actually signed Brooke. As Awesome Kong stands over her latest victim, Madison Rayne takes off the headset she had just put on, leaves the commentary position. Like I said, didn't get the chance to sit down. Rayne then just heads straight to the back. What else can she do? The commentators wonder what her next plan will be. She always seems to have something up her sleeve, but when it comes to Awesome Kong, what can you really do? She's desperately searching for a way to win that match, but it's looking unlikely unless she comes up with something really, really impressive. Awesome Kong has a gimmick that's getting stale, probably a fair comment. We'll try and tweak that or maybe come up with something slightly different. AJ Styles is then interviewed in the back as Jeremy Borash confirms that he will return to pay-per-view this Sunday, the first time he's wrestled on a pay-per-view since Slammiversary, and he'll face Desmond Wolfe. AJ Styles says that he's made no secret since he came back of who he wants to face, but with Kurt Angle and Samoa Joe both being dragged away by security earlier tonight, he realises he can only prepare for what's in front of him. On Sunday, that means beating Desmond Wolfe and leaving no question in anybody's mind about what he deserves, the World Heavyweight Championship match at Bound for Glory. A slightly different outlook from AJ Styles, who earlier on in the year was always saying that he can't focus on anything but what's in front of him. He's definitely slightly taken his eye off the ball because he still has to beat Desmond Wolfe, who has one of the best win-loss records in the company, but his mind is clearly on the World Heavyweight Championship, whether it's Kurt Angle, whether it's Samoa Joe. He wants to be in the main event of Bound for Glory. The question that we'll be trying to put over with commentators and maybe with the questions that Jeremy Borash asks is that going to be the undoing of AJ Styles? Will Desmond Wolfe potentially stand a better chance because AJ Styles has focus and has attention elsewhere? Back in the ring, Jay Lethal comes out to promote his double championship defense at No Surrender, and he speaks about facing Kazuchika Okada and his former best friend Austin Creed, both in the same night. He points out the personal edge to the match with Creed, but adds that he can't do anything other than give both matches equal attention and equal preparation. This Sunday is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, challenge in his career, but those matches that matter are the reason why he's in this business. He wouldn't be here if he didn't want to be defending championships and fighting on pay-per-view. Larry Sweeney then interrupts Jay Lethal, joining him in the ring, albeit shielded by his two clients Okada and Creed. He says that Jay's looked great with those two titles since winning the match that Larry himself masterminded for Slammiversary, but unlike Larry, Jay doesn't have the substance to back up his style. Jay may have been carrying two titles for 3 months, but he's dragged two divisions through the mud with him. Thankfully, that'll change at No Surrender. Jay Lethal will leave with nothing, and Larry Sweeney's stable can set about putting things right. This fires Jay Lethal up, but Larry instead leads his clients away. Creed and Okada are happy to wait. Jay Lethal working well without a script, but Larry Sweeney also holding his own in what is a solid 59 rated segment. It can seem quite lazy sometimes to bring booking inadequacies into the storyline as if, oh, we always meant this. I didn't mean for the X Division to sort of go under the radar, but if Sweeney can bring it into his promo and add something else to the storyline, I don't really see any harm in that. We then come back for a break, and it is time for the match between Abyss and Eric Young, which was set up last week. I did have a video package in here, but the match and angle ratio was off, so I had to add a couple of minutes to this match, and I think as a result I had to cut a couple of angles out of the show overall. As a result, the commentators will just have to explain the storyline, and Eric Young lasts a couple minutes longer than I would have liked him to, but Abyss defeats Eric Young after a wild brawl match, I think it was, all out, but a decisive victory overall for Abyss. He pins Eric Young, and we are putting over that while he's defeated, and quite convincingly, Eric Young showed a lot of guts. Abyss stands tall. Following the match, James Mitchell takes a microphone and orders Abyss to discard of Eric Young's carcass. Mitchell then says that it's been a long while since he's been here, but he's been watching the whole time. They won't forget who has crossed Abyss, and those who have taken things that belong to him. An evil smile then spreads across the face of James Mitchell as he points to the big screen. On it, we see Jay Lethal in the locker room, frantically looking around. He is very, very afraid because he can't find his girlfriend Maria. Having left her in the back while he went out to cut his promo earlier in the night, Jay Lethal is now desperate to find anybody with information. He's talking to everybody around him, but clearly the panic has set in. He just needs to know what's happened. Nobody around him has any idea, but the hour ends with a sadistic James Mitchell laughing maniacally in the ring, his trademark laugh. Abyss stood beside him, and putting two and two together, he has something to do with the sudden disappearance of Maria. And with two matches on his mind going into the pay-per-view, Jay Lethal really doesn't need this in what is probably already one of the most stressful times of his career, so it's not a great segment. Again, these James Mitchell promos aren't rating that well, but I'm sticking with it because I think it's better for the character overall. He does improvise well, however, and we're continuing to build Abyss's character as much as a storyline, but obviously there's a link between Jay Lethal and Abyss. We then return to the second hour of Impact, and Beer Money is shown in the office of Paul Heyman. They suggest to the man in charge that they should be given their rematch this Sunday just to put any doubts to bed. We don't know whether Wrestling's Greatest Tag Team will be fit to compete, whether they'll be 100% for this so-called dream match, so isn't it just better to give them their rematch and save himself the headache? Paul Heyman points out though that them not attacking Wrestling's Greatest Tag Team last week would have been even better. That would have saved him even more of a headache, and what makes them think that now he's going to give them their shot after they did that? Tonight in the main event, Wrestling's Greatest Tag Team are in action, and provided they make it through that match, they'll face MCMG at No Surrender. If not, Kazarian and Daniels will take the shot because they were the last team eliminated in that number one contendership match, and they've put a few wins together this month on top of that. Beer Money aren't happy, but Paul Heyman warns them. If they get involved in tonight's main event match in any way, there are going to be serious consequences. They don't like the threat, but considering what they did last week, they've got off pretty lightly. It's a not great segment. Annoyingly, I think this is the first time I've seen that note, Paul Heyman not doing well without a script, or it's certainly a very, very rare occurrence. James Storm, equally poor, but does gain heat to the storyline. You would expect better from a Paul Heyman segment. We then cut elsewhere, where Jay Lethal is shown to have confronted James Mitchell in the back as he continues his search for Maria. Lethal says that this is the last thing he needs right now and looks to threaten Mitchell. Essentially, predictably, Abyss isn't far behind. He puts his arm around Lethal's throat from behind, and Mitchell, of course, grows more confident as a result of this. James tells Lethal that he took something that belonged to his son, Chris. So now he's taken something that Lethal cares about just as much. Lethal's fired up by this comment, but can't overpower Abyss. The monster then tosses Lethal aside and leaves with his father in tow. So if it wasn't obvious already, that's spelled out in plain English by James Mitchell. They've had something to do with Maria's disappearance, and they see it as an eye for an eye. Comparing a girlfriend to a championship may seem a little bit out there, but this is James Mitchell and Abyss that we're talking about. The Beautiful People then defeat Lacey Von Erich and Brooke Tessmacher. A straightforward, dominant win. It lasts a little bit longer than you'd expect. I did it rated on eye candy because, this match wouldn't have got a 54 if I didn't, and Velvet Sky with a 71, Angelina Love with a 64, and even more starkly considering what they normally get based on their in-ring performances, it's just suited everybody, gave the crowd a breather, and more importantly, decisively puts over the Beautiful People. As the commentators put over during the match, there'll be a three-way tag team match for the Knockouts tag team titles this Sunday. The Beautiful People and Daphne and Roxy getting their shot at the New Age. And after the match, DNR come out to sort of confront the Beautiful People, going face to face ahead of that match that we've just confirmed. Mick Foley is soon out after this though, and comes to the top of the ramp, telling the four women in the ring that the New Age are not happy, and that isn't good news for the four women in the ring. Alyssa Flash and Mischief are understandably pissed off, and they're going to hand out twice the beating at No Surrender. Bound for Glory is just around the corner, and Mick reminds us that the clock is ticking, the time is running down, the New Age is coming to TNA. Again, it's an okay segment. I am actually going to make another turn. Hopefully it'll do her some good. She's got very cold momentum, so things can't go any worse, and it is a complete success. It wasn't really a segment that turned her face, but she should have been a face for a while now. Likewise with Mick Foley earlier in the night. It's just two things that have been a little bit slow to confirm, but it doesn't really matter. A recap from the segment between Kurt Angle and Samoa Joe is then shown. The commentators discussing the highly intense brawl between the two. We then see footage of this Sunday's challenger being led away from the building earlier in the night, just putting over that he's no longer here. As the instigator, he was removed from the impact zone. He will, however, be present at No Surrender, and we've seen how fired up and ready he is for the challenge of trying to take Kurt Angle's World Heavyweight Championship, and perhaps even more importantly, potentially going into Bound for Glory with the biggest prize in the company. We then return to ringside, where Desmond Wolfe makes his way out from the back, and Wolfe cuts a promo on how beating the face of TNA Wrestling is exactly what he needs to get himself back on track. It's no surprise that I was getting a note about having too few matches considering all the squashes that are on the show, and then all these long promo segments, but in trying to sell a pay-per-view, I think we've got a lot of entertaining wrestlers, and generally these are the types of promos that you use to get these matches over. In the build-up to Bound for Glory, there's so many big feuds that I'm going to use video packages, and probably the rivalries will feature on 3 of the 4 shows rather than on all 4, just so that we don't do too many of these in-ring segments. Wolfe wanting the World Heavyweight Championship also at Bound for Glory, and he knows that cutting AJ's pay-per-view comeback short is the fast-track ticket to that. AJ Styles then makes his way out, but Wolfe asks him to hold on. Desmond knows how these originals can get like when their territory is threatened, speaking of course of Samoa Joe's actions earlier in the night, and he says he's too good looking to let AJ do what Joe did to Kurt earlier. AJ has no intention of laying a finger on Wolfe, however, and tells him not to worry. AJ Styles is looking forward to Sunday and settling it in these 6 sides. Styles then walks off as a vignette begins to play. It's not necessarily pointed at either of these guys, but it's just to tag on to what was already it's a really good segment. I didn't think it'd do that well. Both of them improvising very, very well and gaining heat to the main event storyline. So very, very happy to see that. We see an obscured figure on the screen. I'm glad that I've tagged it onto this segment actually. He's training inside a wrestling ring. At the end of the video, the following appears on the screen: Pro Wrestling's top free agent next week. So in 7 nights time on Impact, we will have a new debut, but I didn't want that to overshadow too much the fact that we are building to No Surrender, and that is currently the priority. But it's certainly a teaser that in that final stretch of the build to Bound for Glory, we've got some really, really big, great things happening. The Hooligans then defeat Kiyoshi and Sean Bashir in 5 minutes 41. When Paul London pins Bashir, I would rather have had Kiyoshi as the one taking the fall with a shooting star press. It's just about getting them back on track really. They've had quite a lot of defeats. Rob Terry was at ringside but couldn't have the same effect that Matt Morgan did last week, and it was just about giving the Hooligans a solid, decisive victory. Again, it's another match that I had to add at least a minute to. Making his Impact Zone return, we then get Mr. Anderson coming out as Sean Bashir, Kiyoshi and Big Rob Terry sort of regroup. He first berates Rob Terry's lack of effectiveness at ringside before turning to Kiyoshi and blaming him for Sean Bashir getting pinned. Anderson's friend Bashir tries to placate him, tries to get him to calm down, while Kiyoshi holds back a pretty fired up Rob Terry. Terry's heard enough from Anderson already, but Kiyoshi is trying to keep him down. Uninterested in Sean Bashir's appeals, Mr. Anderson grabs Kiyoshi and hits him with a mic check, turning on the guys who have been working with him. Anderson then grabs a microphone from ringside and says that he might not be booked and Paul Heyman might not want him there, but he's not staying at home anymore. He's coming to No Surrender, and somebody, he's not saying who, is going to have their day ruined courtesy of the asshole. Mr. Anderson then leaves up the ramp, benefiting from a hot catchphrase. Sean Bashir doing a masterful job of improvisation. It's not a great segment, but Mr. Anderson, who has spent a few weeks back at home, is now back in the ring, and he's coming to No Surrender, and he's going to get involved in something, although we don't necessarily know what yet. Following up on his interview with Jazz a couple of weeks ago, Mike Tenay interviews Tara about the match between the two at No Surrender. Tara says that she's looking forward to this match more than any other because this Sunday is no DQ. She knows what Jazz is capable of, she knows the depths that she is willing to sink to, and she agrees with Tenay that this could be a worry. The advantage that Tara has, however, she knows how far Jazz will go, but Jazz, nor Tara herself, know how far she is willing to go when there are no rules. What she does know is that Jazz is the only reason that she isn't walking around with championship gold around her waist, and she's going to make Jazz pay for that. So a very determined, straight to the point interview from Tara, and while she's looking further away potentially from the Knockouts Championship scene than she has all year, she still very much has that focus on wanting to regain her championship. A solid promo that gains heat to the storyline, both members of the segment improvising well, so I can have no complaints there. As we go to an in-ring segment, the commentators were beginning to discuss the show's main event. Impromptu in nature, Paul Heyman comes out and even explains that he wasn't planning on coming out to address the Impact Zone tonight, as he felt that Joe and Angle spoke for themselves earlier tonight. Heyman puts over not only the No Surrender card and helps to build the storyline involved in some of the top matches, he's also received word this minute that the icon Sting will be in attendance on Sunday night. He's called Paul because he has something he desperately wants to say. Sting wants to call out a member of the TNA roster. He's not said anything more than that, but Paul Heyman puts over the impact of the show in relation to Bound for Glory, saying that the best and perhaps only way to ensure a match on the biggest show of the year is to leave as a champion. We have every TNA title on the line for the first time in quite a long time actually. He also confirms the news from earlier tonight that there'll be a new signing in attendance next week on Impact, and he says the newcomer is quite simply one of the best wrestlers on the planet. He's had the pleasure of watching him many times, and he's so happy to have had this week the confirmation that that man has signed with the company. The storyline advancing well, getting the crowd hotter going into this main event. Can certainly have no complaints about that. As we go sort of into the segment that had kind of started before Paul Heyman came out and resumes after, they further promote the pay-per-view as well as tonight's main event. They show footage of wrestling's greatest tag teams 4-way elimination match victory from 2 weeks ago, and the attack from Beer Money last week. This leads into a discussion about the tag team division and footage from the reunion of LAX. Mauro says that Amazing Red will make his in-ring debut as an official member of LAX on Explosion just 24 hours before the No Surrender pay-per-view. In the match that had great heat and good wrestling, perhaps a little bit disappointing, but during the match, James Storm and Robert Roode come out. They distract the referee because he's under strict instructions to not let them anywhere near the ring. Those two were barred from ringside. They're already breaking that rule, but in that distraction with the referee not looking, Matt Morgan is able to take a steel chair and hit Shelton Benjamin with it in the shoulder. When we come back to it, we see that Shelton Benjamin is slumped on the outside. The referee going to check on him, and he decides that Shelton Benjamin cannot continue. A referee stoppage due to a kayfabe injury to Shelton Benjamin. I was torn as to whether to do this as a sports entertainment finish and a draw, or whether to have the win by stoppage, and I thought, I'm not that bothered about Wrestling's Greatest Tag Team having an undefeated streak of sorts. There's a clear reason. We're definitely protecting them in the course of the match, and it does give Kazarian and Daniels a much needed victory, which, when you consider the fallout to this segment, you'll see why that matters. Following the main event, the focus is understandably almost entirely on the seriously hurt Shelton Benjamin. Charlie Haas looks deeply concerned about his partner as he once again requires medical help. Motor City Machine Guns quickly join them at ringside. They're supposed to face them in 3 nights' time on the pay-per-view, and they look equally worried about Shelton. This puts over, along with the commentary, just how serious this situation appears to be. Paul Heyman walks out too and speaks with Charlie Haas, and then to the World Tag Team Champions. Finally, he asks the advice of the medical team who are looking at the injury before reluctantly taking a microphone. He announces to the Impact Zone that there's no way that Shelton's going to be cleared in just 3 days' time. It's a recurrence of the injury that they thought they'd got past. He can't believe he's saying this after what we've just seen. But the Motor City Machine Guns will now defend their championships at No Surrender against Kazarian and Daniels. He almost feels dirty to give these guys the title shot after what they've just done, but that was the agreement. They did come second in that number 1 contendership match. Charlie Haas, Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin can't believe what they're hearing as the arrogant bad influence stand tall in the ring, delighted that in essence their plan worked out. Everything has gone in their favour. It's a decent segment to end the show, not fantastic, but it does advance the storyline, and Paul Heyman inventing a new catchphrase there. I don't know what that could be because it was a very serious promo from him, but the idea now that Paul Heyman has a catchphrase is pretty cool. That'll help his promos, which didn't really need that much help. A good segment to end the show, and I am happy to see that note, even if it seems a little bit out of context. A very solid episode of Impact nonetheless, helped no doubt by those in-ring segments between Wolfe and AJ and Joe and Kurt Angle. But that brings us to the end of the show. I'll see if there's anything of note in the news items, but of course the most important thing is promoting No Surrender. I'll put the card on the screen to end the show. Catchphrase for Paul Heyman, great to see. A new WWE stable called the Filthy Scum, seemingly a version of Legacy with The Undertaker instead of Randy Orton in charge. Again, Shelton Benjamin praising Okada. This is the 3rd time he's done that, and he's only been here a couple of months, so that's pretty good. The viewing figures, getting worse by the week it seems. So in terms of the ratings, we're clearly not building much hype into this new TNA. Hopefully everybody's enjoying what they're seeing though, and thank you for watching No Surrender in 3 days' time.